Shannon, and I'm reading this from a piece of paper, so bear with me. It's my scribble. Tara is an author and illustrator of 2 books. The one book is called Rabbit and Bear, Make a Wish, and the second book is called Rabbit and Bear, Return with Light. Rabbit and Bear became and continue to be her outlet for thoughts, depression, anxiety, grief, magic, and wonder. To Tara's surprise, in March 2020, one of her sketches went viral on social media, leading to the growth of an entire Rabbit and Bear community of readers and fans. Awesome. Next, if you would raise your hand, Sarah. Sarah Netuno. Laura. Laura. You gotta do it. You say it. You say it.
Netuno, Laura.
Isn't that funny? I thought I'd have a hard time with your other last name. Okay. Well, Sarah, I'm going to call her Sarah, is an award-winning illustrator with 3 published picture books and 2 on the way. The one book, first book is called Little Digger's Big Garden, and it was created to help children who have sensory issues when it comes to eating. Sarah was diagnosed at age 25. And then there's that Kate Reynolds. We have to watch her. She talks a lot. We talk to you. Kate Reynolds is a children's librarian who likes to answer every single question, and a singer and a writer based in Windsor, Ontario. In July 2021, she's founded Storytime Solidarity, which is a worldwide group of librarians and educators who are spreading kindness, inclusivity, and diversity through stories. She was just named our executive director because I'm director of outreach. She's mine. And she's currently preparing, this is really cool, she's currently preparing a concert of the music of Mr. Rogers with the Four Wall Music Company. Is that what it is?
It's
and we'll be releasing her first children's album in 2023. How's that? Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So let's start talking. So like I said, I'm going to be hold on, let me find my first. Like I said, I apologize. I did put everything on paper.
Oh, did we forget to say that I was diagnosed with autism in?
Well, we're gonna do that right now,
okay,
Kate.
Sorry.
But can I mute her? No, kidding. Okay, so I'm gonna be pretty candid with my questions so people understand. I'm just asking away, okay? So first, I want to know when everybody was diagnosed, but within that, I want you to talk about how your life changed after your diagnosis, but also how it stayed the same. So, if Tara, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think, well, my official diagnosis process began in October of last year, and it wasn't completed until January of this year. So, and I'm 44. So it's been a long time coming. I sort of always thought that there was something. When I was 42, I started to think that it was, I could be autistic, and I approached my family doctor, and she wasn't really sure. And she diagnosed me with ADHD, and then I was kind of on my own after that to figure out the rest and find someone to help with the assessment. So and then of course it was the pandemic, and that made things a lot more difficult because I was immediately put on all kinds of waiting lists. And anyway, so yes, yeah, 44 when I was officially diagnosed.
Okay, Miss Sarah, tell us about yourself, yo.
Okay, so I was, wait, sorry, what was the whole question again? It was like,
yeah, tell me when you were diagnosed, but also tell us a little bit how your life changed, and maybe even how it even stayed the same.
Okay, yeah, so I was officially diagnosed with autism at age 25, but my diagnosis story is kind of weird because when I was a kid, actually, I was diagnosed with what I call all the ingredients of autism, because, you know, autism is like an umbrella diagnosis with a bunch of smaller diagnoses in it. So when I was a kid, I was diagnosed with expressive and receptive language disorder, and auditory processing disorder, sensory processing disorder, you know, social anxiety, and dyslexia and dyscalculia, just like a bunch. I was diagnosed with a bunch of stuff, and which literally equals autism. And I was, when I was in school, I struggled a lot in school. I was in special ed classes with other autistic kids, and I was also in therapies and stuff, and like speech and language therapy for years. Some of those were group therapies with other autistic kids, so it's really amazing that I didn't figure it out sooner. But when I was diagnosed, you know, some of the things that I guess stayed the same was that, you know, I'm still me, like who I am is the same. But the biggest thing that changed was I started to gain like a new understanding of myself. I started to research, I started to understand things, relate to things, and be like, oh, that's why I struggle with this, that makes sense. And that helped me tremendously. And honestly, my life is so much better now because I now understand myself better. I know how to like help myself, and I've also learned to accept myself, so I no longer struggle with feelings of you know, just being not smart and things like that. I just everything's better. My anxiety is less, it's all better. So
See, that's so wonderful that you say that, because there's so many people out there that, and I just recently met with a parent who her child's an adult and she's scared to get diagnosed because of the stigma with autism, that she doesn't understand the diagnosis just might help her.
it helps so much. It's crazy. So much happier now.
Talk to us, Kate.
So that's such a good point, that like neurotypicals, when they hear you're diagnosed, they're like, oh, we're so sorry. But like other autistic people are like, oh, congratulations, your life is about to start now. Yeah. So as a child, I was actually identified as gifted, which I think masked a lot of it. There were like, oh, the stereotype, oh, well, you know, some smart kids are just really weird. But there's a difference between being a little bit eccentric and getting lost going to the bathroom every day, when it is also very visible from your original classroom. I would go out the wrong way, end up all the way lost in the school, and it was like a 12-foot walk. So, you know, that's some pretty impressive getting lost. And there were always these worrying things with school behaviorally, but we were just like, oh, you know, she's just awkward. And I thought that everybody else, you know, they always say people feel the same inside as you do. So I thought everybody else was probably feeling the same feelings I was and just handling it better. So I say sometimes for me, getting diagnosed was a lot like learning that most people don't feel autistic inside, like learning that they're having a completely different sensory experience. And that's why like people who look like they're having fun aren't just pretending better than me. There's been a lot of self-acceptance. And
When were you diagnosed? What age?
oh yeah, 35, 2 years ago. So early in 2020 in June. And I have to say, too, when I was diagnosed, I had that negative association at first, too, with the stigma. And what got me over it was Hannah Gadsby coming out about her diagnosis, because this was somebody I was already a fan of her comedy, and I thought she was hilarious and amazing. And I was like, well, she's obviously still a cool person if she's autistic, and then it's okay that I'm autistic. And that's why that was the moment I decided that I wasn't just going to accept my diagnosis. I was going to share it so that other people would see that autism can look a lot of different ways.
Do you guys think that, or ladies think that, if you were diagnosed at early age, like even like a child, your life would have been different? Or
Yes.
Yeah,
I think so. And I think that even says a lot coming from someone with my weird story too, because, you know, I was diagnosed with a lot of stuff as a kid, and I received a lot of the same therapies as autistic kids and in like special ed classes and stuff. But so like service wise, as far as like therapies and stuff, it probably wouldn't have been any different for me because I still got all the same stuff. But what would have been like the game changer for me is I would have like learned to understand myself better at a younger age, and like all those years of just constantly being misunderstood and being upset with myself over it, not understanding, not knowing why I was like this, I feel like it would have helped a lot with that.
what do you say, Tara? Do you agree?
I agree in the fact, I get, like, I'm the oldest, so when I was 6 years old, grade 1, I was failed. I was held back in that grade. And from that point onward, I felt like a failure. And I felt like the square peg in the round hole, and I was bullied and teased by other kids. And I remember there were some people, like other teachers' aides that I had, but kind of beyond grade 1, I really don't remember that. And I feel that if I'd been given the opportunity to be taught in a way that that my brain needed to be taught, that would have prevented me from being failed and thinking of myself as a failure as I moved forward in life, because then I felt like this added pressure of I have to prove myself even more. I have to try even harder. And that led to a lot of anxiety as a young person, and burnout, and pushing myself and thinking poorly of myself. And it wasn't me. It was my brain just operated in a different way from other people. And so when my doctor even just said to me that it was, she saw ADHD, when I was 42, I remember leaving that appointment, and at that point I'd already been kind of reading about about autism and thinking that I was that as well, and I just burst down in tears and cried most of my way home, because it was a realization, and it was this feeling of relief. It wasn't me. I was lost by the system didn't see me, but it wasn't me. I wasn't the failure. Maybe the system failed me.
Yeah,
But it wasn't me. Yeah.
But
so
I feel like
was
the
able
system,
to be
like 44 years ago, wasn't what it is today.
No,
not at all. Like
when
there
I
was like,
It's growing.
no, like I think there were boys. Like I remember in year after that, like there were certainly, I think at some point they realized something, because by grade 4 I was put into a split class, and I was the only girl. I was in the lower end of the split class. So it was weird. Even then it was like, and it, I was away from all the other girls, and it was weird. But I know in that split class that the boys, some of them were being shipped off to enrichment classes elsewhere at other schools. One was definitely diagnosed as autistic, and some of the other boys, I didn't know how I fit, yet I was there.
Yeah.
So
what do you think? What do you say, Kate? Do you feel if you were diagnosed in elementary school? Say.
Oh, I mean, I have some fears, because I know that a lot of the things they do to help autistic kids are kind of traumatic for them. So I don't know if I would have ended up in a therapy that would have tried to force me to be someone I wasn't. And that's really scary to me. The idea that I could have had ABA therapy, I'm really glad I was spared that. But if I had known even a decade earlier, I think of all the dumb decisions I made because I didn't understand myself. I was just sort of, for a long time, I've heard jokes about people feeling like they're cosplaying as a person. Like I felt like I was impersonating a person because I didn't know what to be and how to be authentic. And when I was first diagnosed, I really felt that every single day before my diagnosis had been a missed opportunity to be myself. And now I see, there's some benefits to diagnosis later, just mostly because the therapies were so upsetting to me when I learned about them. But mostly, yeah, I wish I'd known sooner. And that's why it's so heartbreaking that the system misses so many kids, right? Because everyone I talk to who gets diagnosed as an adult says that they're so glad they finally know.
You brought up something interesting, how there was a time where they would try to change people and make them quote unquote better. And that brings up the organization Autism Speaks. And I just wanted to touch on that, not too long. It's kind of, it's a lot of negative behind it. So I want to talk about that. I want you guys talk about a little bit your view on Autism Speaks and their methodology. Anybody wants to talk
I'll go
first?
first. Sure. My experience with Autism Speaks is limited, I feel. I am aware of it. I'm learning from other autistics in the community that's I'm building around me now. But as in the group, maybe at this moment I don't have that much experience. I'm aware of what ABA is, and I feel that that growing up, maybe I wasn't exposed to ABA per se, but I was exposed to parents who were born during the Depression in the post-war years, and I was a child that I was a child that didn't fit in, and so I think I still experienced some of that by way of them, by their discipline, because don't tap. I would tap on things. I would be very hyperactive, and I would be I don't know, I would act out, and I would be sent to my room. Don't come out until you're acting a certain way. So that's kind of how my early years of life were. And I remember even a teacher in school, the way that I would write. I was kept in class one day, and he noticed how I held my pencil, and he wanted to put something on my hand in order to force me to not do that. And so when I look back, I'm like, I see those things happening, but I certainly I had no direct experience with anything like Autism Speaks until now, and it's a big learning curve for me. It's new, and I'm learning, and that's me. That's where I fit.
I know Sarah has a view on Autism Speaks.
Yeah.
Want to tell us your view?
Yeah, well, I think so I've pretty much suspected I was autistic since like high school, because I was in special ed. I was literally around autistic people all the time in school, and I related so much with them, and a lot of my friends were autistic, and so I've was very strongly suspecting I was autistic starting in high school, but I would have doubts because I had so many signs. I had so many of those stereotypical signs too, like lining up toys and language issues and like everything. But there were some things that made me doubt my suspicion of being autistic, and it can all be traced back to Autism Speaks, because when I was in high school, I didn't know much about autism. So when I started suspecting it, I would like research, and everything I found on the topic was all from Autism Speaks. And the way that they would like portray autism made it look like such a tragedy. And so I would like watch their PSAs, and I would be like, well, that's not me. My life isn't a tragedy. Like, yeah, there's things that are hard on a daily basis, and I struggle, but my life isn't a tragedy, and my family doesn't think I'm a tragedy. And so like it was things like that was like, maybe I'm not autistic. And then it was other things too, like Autism Speaks would what is it called? They would like push a bunch of autism myths, and so there was a few in particular. They would push this myth that has since been completely debunked and disproven, that autistic people have no empathy, or like aren't very empathetic. That has now been completely disproven, but back then I didn't know that. So I would see that and I would be like, well, I have so much empathy. Like I've never struggled with that. Or they would push this myth that like autistic people aren't creative, or like lack imagination. And I would be like, I'm
authors here.
I'm the opposite of that. I'm an artist. That's like art and creativity is my strength. So it was basically solely because of Autism Speaks that I didn't know any better. I believed these myths. And so if it weren't for me believing these myths, then I might have like pushed it more, you know, my belief that I am autistic, and like really believed it like fully at a younger age, and you know, brought it up to my parents or whatever, because they believed those myths just as much as I did. It's not their fault. They tried so hard. They tried so hard to help me and understand me, and you know, they really did a number on autistic people, especially girls. Yeah, so that's my view.
I think you said it all, Kate. What do you got to add?
Well, I got to say the girls thing was huge because my mom and I had actually talked about autism a few times. Well, oh, it doesn't really affect girls. Like that information and awareness that they're spreading is so inaccurate that it hides us from ourselves.
Yeah.
But I think too, like, as we look at our work in Storytime Solidarity, and I think of, you know, activism and how it's supposed to work, one of my biggest issues, or two of my biggest issues with autism are, one, I don't think you can support a community you're trying to eradicate. So as long as they're looking for a cure for autism, they can't really support autistic people because they're not looking to make autistic lives better. They're not looking to make us our own advocates. They're not looking to make comforting environments for us. They're just looking to get rid of autism because autism is bad in their mind. And to me, that's a huge issue. And then to go further, they don't have any autistic leadership. And that's completely ridiculous. You know, this idea, well, you know, autistic people can't really serve on boards. I'm on 2 boards for things that don't have anything to do with autism. I'm the executive director of something. Now that I can work with my autism, I can do all kinds of stuff for the community, but I couldn't do it with my autism.
But now that you had said to me once that you feel like after your diagnosis, you were able to do more like this. You had that from it.
Yeah, I had such a better understanding of myself and how to manage my symptoms because autism is not easy, but it can come with some gifts. And I don't think we have to be, you know, preternaturally gifted to be valuable as autistic people, just like we don't have to as allistic people. But you can't without, it's like, you know, it's hard enough to set up this live stream, right? Trying to get all the computers going. But imagine none of us knew which operating system we were using. If I was still trying to use my Android phone like it's an iPhone, it's not going to work. It's not a worse phone. I just need to know what operating system I'm on. And that's how I think of autism. It's a different operating system. It's frustrating because everybody else is on an operating system that I'm not super compatible with, but at least now I know what I'm on and I can work with.
So, well, I first want to just say really quick the word allistic. That means just not autistic for people that just don't know what that word means. So let's move on to the next question. Let's start with Kate on this one. I actually want to talk about stimming a little bit. I think everybody thinks clapping and that's it. That's what autistic people do, they clap. Tell us.
Well, I did, as a little girl, I really did clap. It was an issue and my mom was like, you got to stop. Like she suspected something when I was little because I'd do things, but then I would try to find something more socially acceptable to replace it with. But right now, off camera, I am stimming. I've got this bracelet that is made of chain and it helps keep me calm. I've got this little ball in the thing and I've got this on my wrist and it really helps me regulate, and I can do it off camera in a way that I hope is not too obvious, and I can, you know, keep myself regulated that way. And if I don't,
what does stimming do for you? What does it do for you? Is it mostly calming? Explain what it means. I don't think people know what it is or why.
You know, I'm still not 100% sure I understand it, but it calms me down, and if I don't find a positive outlet for it, I'll end up biting my nails until they bleed, or I'll like end up like in sort of minor self-harm territory. So for me, it calms me down enough that I can handle things.
I think people are related to children too, and they have to understand adults also stim.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. You know, I try to find ways to stim that aren't annoying to others. Like I got one of those little bubble pop things. And my partner absolutely couldn't stand it. So I'm not a jerk. So I tried to find something else that I liked as much that wouldn't be like, just have them there like, oh my God. Because, you know, I want to find something that's quiet, that's non-invasive, and that helps calm me down without bothering anyone else.
Sarah, tell us about, I know you told me something really cool that I never knew about stimming, having to do it light, and I just think it's awesome. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I'm also just like Kate stimming right now. That's my favorite. I have been the entire meeting with this. It's literally just a rubber kitchen sponge, but I use it as like a stem toy. It's my favorite thing ever. But yeah, so for those who don't know though, because we didn't really explain this, stimming is any kind of repetitive action or anything that you do, and it's basically used to it's a natural thing that autistic people do, and it calms us down. And well, it's kind of serves to calm us down and regulate us, but it also just serves as like an energy outlet for like if we're really excited or something like that. So like like for me, I've done a lot of stimming my whole life, and it's changed over the years. When I was really little, my biggest stims were spinning and lining up toys, which is a stim. I would just do that all the time, and spinning. And I also I would also hand flap, but I mostly hand flap when I'm like really excited or frustrated or anxious or something. That's when you'll see me hand. And I do a ton of other subtle stims too. Like I do this tap thing a lot, or squeeze. Another super big one for me is I'll listen to the same song literally like over and over and over again for weeks with no songs in between, and that one kind of drives my husband insane, but but I like it. And yeah, it's just stimming is good, and I would also I realized as I got older that it's not always like socially acceptable, and so I had a really bad issue with nail biting my whole life, and I realize now after learning more about autism that was like me suppressing stims and turning it into more socially acceptable. But it was terrible, and it was a horrible habit, and I finally broke it, but I'm allowing myself to which honestly, I've never really been the type of autistic person to have a lot of self-awareness. Like some autistic people have so much and others don't, and I don't. So like usually when I am stimming my whole life, I'm not even aware of it. So I did mask a little bit, but I'm not very good at masking because
I remember you had told me something about how you would stim using the light, and it had something, and it actually influenced your illustrations and why you
yeah.
I love this.
Yeah. So that's a stim that people don't really understand as a stim, but one of my consistent stims I've had my whole life is staring at things, and so like it's not the staring that's the stim, but it's the thing that you're staring at that's repetitive is like a visual stim. And so like I would my favorite things to stare at is like lighting and reflections. So I would just like stare at like the like creeks, like flowing water, like lighting, reflecting and refracting off creeks, or like fire, or just like the lighting from fire reflecting off its surround. I would just stare at this, and it was so fun. And it really ended up serving me because it helped me. Like I was literally just studying lighting and like physics basically, and it really helped me. As I'm a professional illustrator now, and I've always just been natural at understanding how things work and how they are to be rendered in illustration wise. And I thank my stimming for that, because if I hadn't literally spent my entire life just staring at lighting and studying it, I would have had no idea how to draw lighting and how to draw shadows. I would have had to be taught that, but I actually never had to be taught that. I just always knew how to do that.
It's so cool.
Yeah, so it helps me.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, Tara, can you tell us? And also, if you could, Tara, could you talk a little bit about masking? I know we had talked about that, and you had a lot to say about that too.
Apparently, I'm a really big masker, according to my assessment. But I think that's just simply because the supports weren't there when I was growing up, and because because I wanted to fit in, and I didn't know what was happening with me. So I would watch television. I would watch other kids to see how they were acting, and try and take cues from that to figure out what was acceptable for me. And one of the weird ones, I guess, was maybe not so much because but Blair on The Facts of Life, for anybody who was growing up in the 80s watching TV. I was like, she's pretty and she's popular. And so that would be my older sister. I would look to, as I got older, it was other friends that I had in my circle, like, oh, they're popular, so maybe try and hide some of myself in acting the way that they did. As far as stims go, when I was younger, it was definitely spinning. I did that a lot until I would either fall over or be sick. Watching the same movies over and over again, and TV shows, if I could, tape them with the VCR. Same with music. And then unfortunately, because I had to learn to hide it. And so I would go inside my mind, and I had a very active imagination. So I might be staring off and doing the similar things Sarah is, and looking at light and looking at different things, and look like I was staring, which sometimes I was, but then I was also just inside my head, and living in there and imagining things, and that was my coping. But I also would tap. And I remember learning about what is it, syllable, like with words, like how many syllables, and I was like, oh, I can tap out every like word, and I just thought that was so great. And then this, my self-soothe is to scratch and pick at my head, and typically I'll be doing that as I'm like going to sleep at night, or when I'm waking up in the morning. And a lot of times I don't even realize that I'm doing it. And I'm conscious of it now because I can see myself. So as I'm sitting here, I'm just sort of tapping my foot. Nobody would kind of detect it. But yeah, so.
Kate, Sarah, do you do mask?
I mask like
I
crazy.
don't. Yeah.
Who wants to go first? Let's fight it out. Sarah, go first.
You can go first. Okay. Yeah, so I don't really mask. I think, autism is all about extremes with different traits and stuff. And I've noticed that some autistic people have extreme hyper awareness of themselves and what they're doing and how others are reacting to it, and then others have like zero self-awareness, and I definitely fall into the second box. Like, I only have self-awareness now because I was diagnosed and I did so much research and I started learning about myself, but in individual moments I have no self-awareness. I have no self-awareness. So because of that, it was really hard for me to mask. Like I didn't do any of the masking things. I didn't watch TV to study people's social stuff. I didn't watch others and study them. I didn't really do that. I masked a little bit here and there around select people, but it was hard to even do that because I had to be aware first, and I wasn't very good at being self-aware. So like when I was diagnosed, one of the psychometrics I had to take was about masking, and the doctor commented and said like you don't mask. How do you not mask? Like, she was shocked because most adults that get diagnosed later in life mask a lot. And that especially seems to be like the female experience. But she was like, yeah, you mask very, very little. And she was really impressed by it and told me that it was a good thing. And, it means less anxiety and depression and things like that. Yeah, so she actually diagnosed me with unmasked autism, is what she said, which isn't really a technical term, but that's what she told me. So yeah, I feel like an outsider a little bit sometimes because I don't mask and most people do. So
What about you, Kate?
So I learned that masking is more than I thought it was. So both of what you said like is really interesting, but what blew my mind was I was talking to my sister and she said, you know, masking is more than what you're doing in the moment. It's the way, like for me, one of my masks was to create a narrative like, well, I must be doing great because I travel, because I do this, because I do that. And it's like nobody saw that at the end of the day, I was like my face droops, like I become a different person when I don't have to be, but also just like that we can mask from ourselves. I was like, well, maybe everybody also had a terrible time at this and I'm the only, like, so I kind of did like a self-masking too that I hadn't even thought of as part of it until quite recently.
like convincing yourself of something, you mean?
Yeah, it was like, well, how could I be struggling this much when I've accomplished X, Y, and Z? So I would try to look for like external validation to make up for the fact that I knew something was off. And it wasn't even necessarily from other people. It would be like accomplishments. It would be, well, I've been published in X, well, I've done this. Well, everything must be fine, or I wouldn't have been able to do that.
I like that. Okay, my next question is for really everybody because I think people kind of pretty much answered this already, but I want to know if there are any hurdles you had to deal with before or after your diagnosis. Raise your hand if you have something, because I think I pretty much. Let's start with Sarah, and then we'll Tara next.
Before or after? I mean, I had lots of hurdles, you know, just related to autism, and I also have learning disabilities too, but I think my biggest hurdle before diagnosis that had to do with not being diagnosed was just having zero self-awareness, zero understanding of myself, how to help myself, how to get other people to understand me better by explaining myself to them. And after diagnosis, I would say my biggest hurdle has been getting people to drop their stigmas around autism because, you know, there's a lot of myths still around about autism, a lot of, you know, negative connotation. It's definitely better right now than it was like even 10 years ago. But yeah, I think that's been like my biggest hurdle so far is just getting people to like the thing you said earlier about how when you tell a neurotypical person that you were diagnosed autistic and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. But when you tell an autistic person that you just got diagnosed, they're like, congratulations. You know, like, welcome. There's like such a disconnect, and so my biggest hurdle has been like trying to teach those around me that autism is not a tragic thing. Like, yes, it comes with challenges for sure, but I'm better able to navigate them now that I have a diagnosis. So the diagnosis is a good thing, and just, you know, just getting rid of all the myths. Like, people are still bought into the myths. So I'm working hard to get rid to teach people about the truth about autism.
What do you got, Tara? Do you have anything?
Well, I agree. I agree with, you know, that getting rid of that stigma that's there. But immediately what comes to mind is like before and after is being seen. I feel invisible. I felt invisible before, and I still feel a little bit invisible now, even though it was a relief to be diagnosed. It was eye-opening for me, and it made sense. But I still have, there's still some people that when I say it, they're like, well, why do you think that? You don't look that. You do all, you know, do all these things. And then in before it was kind of similar. My family doctor, when I started to think that it was something that I was that I was autistic. So every single test that I could find online, I took it and I scored high. And I read all of the articles that I wasn't looking at Autism Speaks, but I was looking at these research papers and articles that were being done by professionals in the UK and in Australia and kind of around the world. And I'm like, that's me, I see me. And so I built this case, literally built this case file of tests that I had printed off and articles, and wrote out like a personal essay that went on for a couple of pages about how I saw myself as an autistic person, and that fit with the ADHD. And I took this clump of papers to my doctor, and she took it and she's like, okay, but I don't think you are, because you can make eye contact and you pick up on social cues. And I'm like, well, yeah, because I've spent 42 years at that point. I remember specifically in high school, I knew people would look at me when I was talking, and I would often look up or in a different direction. And I started to realize that by their reaction to me, because they would look where I was looking, that wasn't something that they did. So I started to force myself, and I wonder now what I looked like to the person I was talking to. I would force myself to hold eye contact when I was talking.
Be uncomfortable. That has to be uncomfortable for you. It was uncomfortable for me. I remember it being uncomfortable, but I was like, okay, I got to do this because this is what people do. And so I know I specifically forced myself to learn that skill, good or bad, whatever you want to call it. I forced myself into doing that. So when the doctor said that to me, it's like, you wouldn't believe the amount of energy that goes into making the eye contact and trying to pick up on social cues. Because I still sometimes struggle with it. I feel like I've kind of somewhat, in some ways, mastered the art of sarcasm, which is another myth about autistic people, is that they don't get sarcasm or jokes and things like that. We certainly do, but I will admit that sometimes I don't. But yeah, and now see, I'm losing track of the question that was asked. But yeah, I don't know. Did I answer the question? You answered it.
I feel like okay.
Kate, do you have anything to say?
I also forgot the question because I was so busy listening to Tara's story and hearing that the ways were different and the ways were similar.
It was about aerodynamics, remember? No. I was asking about if you had hurdles.
Oh, yeah. I mean, some people don't believe me, even with pretty much the best diagnosis you're going to get. So I saw my neuropsychologist who diagnosed me. I still see him for therapy. And he did he does neurofeedback. So he put electrodes all over my scalp and monitors my brain waves to help heal them. And if it was possible for there to be a flashing light that was like, autism, it was right there the second he got it. And he said he had suspected, because my mom made the appointment for me, he had suspected I was autistic before he even met me for the first time. And he knew, but he didn't he's a man of science, right? He didn't let the fact that he immediately intuited it get in the way of doing all the proper testing. So then we had 8 hours, possibly 10 hours of testing.
He wanted his copay.
No, he's delightful. He's doing it to put good, he saved my life. And I think that had I not been diagnosed, I was not going to figure it out on my own, because I was doing so much hiding from myself by trying to do all the things that were normal. I thought that would make me normal, and that's just not going to work. But it felt like it would work, especially because I was perceived by some to be doing well. But then, the thing is with masking, you can only hide it so much, because when my mom started telling people, when I started telling people, they were a lot less surprised than even I had been, because they could see me not reading social cues, because they could see the social cues I was missing. I can I can make humor and I can be very sarcastic, but I cannot read other people's sarcasm very well. So every once in a while, I'll follow someone's detailed instructions that were a joke, and they'll be like, "Oh no, what did you do? Why would you do this?" And I think that I'm about to, get positive feedback, and I'm not. And I knew that it was during the testing that I figured out I was autistic, because I was being asked to identify all these different facial expressions on these images, and like the expression I thought it wasn't even one of the options for any of them. I just looked at like everyone. I was like, mad at me, mad at me, mad at me. And I realized that I thought people were mad at me all the time, because by that point I was reading social cues so poorly that I think I was getting a lot of negative feedback from others without realizing. And it's embarrassing. Like for me, when I found out I was autistic, it's like, when people put the am I the a-hole jokes, like I was like, oh no, I have been in nearly every encounter I've ever had. I probably was, because everybody else had information that was missing to me. And so I had to kind of make my peace with the fact that I've embarrassed myself. I've done things that I regret, and these things weren't my fault. It was because if I'd had an understanding of my neurology, I would have made better decisions. And so there's meaning for those years that I made decisions without knowing what operating system I was working with.
Yeah.
So I want to give one more question. It's a pass talk. So I want to be able to ask people in the audience out there if they have any questions. But this is a really fast one. If you could, what would you tell an allistic person about being autistic? What would you, just one thing you could tell them? Start with you, Tara, if you have something.
It's more than what you may think it is. It's more than the stereotypes that are out there, and I guess just that it's much more than meets the eye. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How about you, Sarah?
Still thinking.
We'll come back to you. Kate, what do you have?
We're different. We're not less. And I get so tired of neurotypical or allistic people saying, why do you need the label? I don't believe in labels. And it's only a label if you see it as a negative thing. So I see it as neutral. Just like I'm a cis person and there are trans people, one is not better than the other. There are allistic people and there are autistic people. And if you deny me my autistic label, you are not preventing me from being labeled. You're slapping the wrong label on me and hiding me from myself.
Well,
you got one?
Yeah. Well, I do have one, but I wanted to add to what she just said real quick too, about slapping the wrong label. The thing that I feel like a lot of people don't understand, and parents out there who might not want to get their kid diagnosed because they don't want to label them or whatever, what people don't understand is that even if you don't get the right label, you still get labeled. Like as a kid, everybody else labeled me. I got labeled with things like naive, idiot, dumb, the R word. I got called that before. Sped. I got labeled like all sorts of terrible negative labels that just made me feel horrible about myself. So then when I got the autism label, I was like, oh, that's the real label. And all those other ones weren't true. Those were just lies because they didn't understand me. And it made me feel so much better about myself. But yeah, I guess the one thing I would want someone who isn't autistic to understand is that it's really not a bad thing. And if you're autistic yourself, it's a game changer to know that about yourself. It helps in every aspect of life, and autism in itself is not a bad thing. It's not negative. It's just a different thing, and it has its strengths and it has its weaknesses, just like literally anybody else in the world has things they're going to deal with and things they're good at. It's just a different kind of world altogether.
All right. Well, let's take some questions. I can't see the questions, so Kate, you want to take a look?
I'm going to see. We have 130 comments, so I'm really trying.
Scroll through a little. We only have time really for a few questions, so
okay.
See what you got, or anything people are saying that's just super cool.
Oh, somebody's asking if masking should be addressed or ignored by a teacher. That's a good question.
Oh,
Thank you, Sue, for that question.
By a teacher?
So,
In what way?
like, do you
yeah,
feel?
Would you?
I think that's
Like,
the main next
yeah, like
question,
if
right?
yeah.
How
It's
would
more of
you?
a teacher question. I mean, I think, like, you think that, I guess,
I don't understand the question.
let me think. Let's see.
I don't know. I don't know if a teacher would have known that I was masking. 'Cause
Yeah,
they didn't.
I don't think, like, okay, yeah, it's true. Like, for example, have you had teachers that would have wanted you to mask or not wanted you to mask?
You know, I was thinking, I had a teacher who recognized one of my masks, and she said something. The problem is that unless you know why somebody's masking and what they're masking about, I think it's hard to address it in an effective way. I was told to stop being so ditzy, but it was either ditzy or, like, I wasn't hiding the fact that I was confused. I was just trying to express my confusion in a socially acceptable way. Like, I wasn't pretending to be confused, though. So I think that they don't always, I think it's hard for somebody on the outside to recognize which part is the mask. So that would make it hard to address. Does that make sense with you guys?
It's like teachers should almost like teachers should know what the masks are or lack of masks are to be able to work with the children. I think that's important.
Well, also, I think.
I guess that just. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think they realize that this is what they're doing. I don't think they mean any harm by it, but I have had a lot of teachers in the bad experiences with teachers and stuff. And I think just in general, neurotypical people oftentimes I think without realizing that that's what they're doing, I think they do want us to mask because sometimes they just don't understand us. And so if we mask and we pretend to be more like them, then it's easier for them to understand us and easier for them to like us, I guess. And I definitely have, I'm a horrible masker, but now that I understand what it means, I've definitely had experiences with teachers where they wanted me to be less like this or more like this or stop doing this, and now I know that that's what that means.
Yeah.
Were you saying, Tara?
Yeah, I think it goes down to better training for teachers, for doctors too, for that matter, at recognizing how autism presents in people who aren't just the stereotype. So that goes for girls, boys, anybody that doesn't present in that typical way, and then seeing those signs and then offering to help and not judge. And I mean, because I just see I think when I was 6 and, leading up to when I was failed, they knew something was up enough to fail me. They knew something was up enough to have a teacher's assistant sit with me separate from the other kids and try and help me with math. There was something they realized, but it just wasn't known enough. There wasn't enough known about it in regards to someone like me back in 1984. So we've come farther than we were then, but we still have a ways to go, and we just need some kindness and to be seen.
The key is kindness always. Want to find some more, Kate?
I've got another really good question for you guys. Somebody's asking how to pursue an adult diagnosis when you're disbelieved by your healthcare professional. Is so hard, right? That question breaks my heart. I think there needs to be more. Yeah.
Go ahead, Kate.
Oh, I mean, there needs to be more education. The fact that we're out and other people are out who really don't look like we think of autism. So I think maybe like seeing people like Hannah Gatsby, who's way in the media, like things like that may help. But like, I don't know, I guess I would tell somebody to look for another professional, look for somebody who understands autism, even if you can't get a referral to start, you know, try to find a neuropsychologist, try to find experts, get somebody with the credentials to back you up if you think you're autistic. And I don't know how you guys feel about self-diagnosis, but I strongly feel that it's valid because access to diagnosis is a privilege that not everyone has.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree.
I
I asked. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was
ahead,
just
Sarah.
gonna say, when I was looking at people who test and stuff, I realized that, you know, people don't even if there's like someone at a place that does know how to test for adults, places that do autism testing, they don't advertise at all on their website that they will test adults. And so what I did when I was like starting the process, because I was like really struggling in that moment, I was like, I need to get tested. So I found all the places I could, you know, around that just did autism testing in general, and then I called them, because it did not advertise anywhere or say anywhere that they do adult tests. It's all child focused on the website. So I had to call them and ask, do you have anybody who knows how to test an adult or specializes it? And they'd be like, oh yeah, this doctor and this doctor specialize in adults. We just don't advertise it on the website because it doesn't help us. And so I would say that's a big myth. Don't get discouraged just because you can't find it on websites. You might just have to like do more digging, because you know, they make the most money by testing kids, and so they don't really advertise adults on websites and things.
Do we have another question from the crowd?
I was just gonna.
I'm
I'll
sorry.
add that I asked within the community, the autistic community. I found friends, other women that were adult women who were officially diagnosed. So that's eventually I felt like I had run out of options locally. I was calling and being put on wait lists only to find out that they didn't test or assess adults. And so finally I reached out to another friend, and I asked her where she had her assessment, and then I contacted them, and that's how it went. But yes, it's I believe in self-assessment. And that it's legitimate, and that it was just, I didn't know for the longest time if my benefits were going to cover the assessment process, and so it's a privilege to be able to get that. It can be hard.
So we're at our hour, so let's do one more question and then we'll end off there.
Okay, so it's really just been more questions about diagnosis. I had no idea. I'm really glad we're able to reach so many people who are discovering themselves. So maybe I can ask a question for us. Like, what's one thing you wish somebody had told you when you were just figuring it out that you were autistic?
You asked a hard one.
I'm sorry, I can go first. I wish somebody had told me, I wish somebody had congratulated me. I wish somebody had said, you're about to figure things out. It's about to get better. But I think for so many of us, and definitely this was true for me, my diagnosis came from being in the worst shape of my entire life. I had to be in a position of incredible crisis to get the help I needed. And, you know, there's support. And the other thing I wish somebody had told me was, you can learn a lot from reading, but you can learn a lot from reading social media. Follow other autistic people on social media. There's people right in this group, but there's just so many wonderful people sharing their stories. And if you don't relate to one, you'll relate to another. And I think while there are traditionally published autistic authors, there's not as many. So you might have to go kind of for routes that seem less official, but the official narrative has been tainted by the fact that for decades we only studied white men. and absolutely no one else. So we don't know how it looks in so many different ways, and there's still so much we need to learn. But other autistic people have been my greatest resource, and I'm so grateful for the people I've connected with, like the people in this conversation.
Anyone else have an answer to this really hard question?
Sorry.
It is a hard question. I agree. I agree with exactly what Kate just said, and just to just keep doing things the way that feel right to you, and one being your own self-advocate. And unfortunately, I've found myself having to be that a few times with different health situations in my life, but then also in the way that my brain processes things and how I approach things. I have not approached publishing in the kind of standard way, yet somehow it's been working for me. And so there's a shift there. Yeah, keep being you.
Yeah, I think the question was, what's some what was the question again? Sorry.
It's okay. I was just gonna say, what do you wish you had been told right after diagnosis? But I think any advice for autistic people would be welcomed.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's not really anything I wish I had been told. I guess really more like I wish I hadn't been told would be more like it. Like I wish I hadn't. I was asked so many times by a lot of people when I told them either I was going to get tested or that I had just got diagnosed. I was asked, what's the point of getting a diagnosis as an adult? You've already lived this far without it. And I got that question so many times by everyone, and it just really annoyed me, that question, because they don't get it. They don't get it, what it's like to live your whole life up to that point without a diagnosis. A diagnosis provides so much, no matter how old you are. I know autistic people who got diagnosed at 80 years old and it changed their life. And because it's just a good thing. You don't have to get diagnosed at 2 years old for it to benefit you. It can benefit you at any age. And so if you feel like you would really benefit from it, then I really encourage anybody who feels like they might be autistic to try to go down that route if you're able to, because it was life-changing for me, and just so much better, healthier, just happier, everything because of it. So
yeah, everything is better.
Aww. I like that. That's our end quote. Everything is better.
Everything is better.